Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to this. It's a podcast, and it's all about the Irish League. Can you imagine? The Gibson Cup returned to Windsor Park this week, where Linfield claimed, lifted, and then paraded about that league title for a world record 57th time on Saturday afternoon. How good, in fact, was this season for the Blues? We're going to talk about it, as well as ask, what did they do right? And will this be the start of a new era of dominance for the South Belfast side? Elsewhere, the race for second is no more clear than it was last week. The fate of Loughgall very much is, and Cliftonville, for some reason, seem to be the only team remotely interested in finishing 7th this year. Let's talk about it all on your latest weekly edition of Kicking Match. Last week, my guest was a man who had lifted a league title or two during his playing days, wearing the blue shirt of Linfield. Of course, I'm talking about Stuart King. And this week is a man who, from the sidelines, has watched his beloved Blues lift many more a league title and plenty of other trophies in between. And he's feeling pretty good after the weekend. I think it's made him only hungrier for more. It's great to welcome back to the podcast. It's regular contributor Mark McGuiggan.
How's it going, sir? How are you?
I'm all good. Looking well. Don't look like the sun has burnt your pale skin to a crisp. You've still got the smile on your face, though. You've got a glow, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. People usually say that I don't tan very well, but that'll do. We'll stick with that line. Yeah, great day out on Saturday. Lovely day. Nice and warm. Good to beat the Glens on the big day, of course.
Finally, last chance to do it in the league, and you did it. Gibson's back home. Linfield fans will say 57th world record in the bag. It has been a season where it has been destiny unfolding slowly but surely. But was it worth it in the end? Surely. I mean, it's been a couple of years where it hasn't been absolute vintage Linfield. Perhaps that first title win for Larne was a little flick on the nose that then became a massive irritant the next season, but you came back, and despite Larne grabbing all the headlines early in the season, Linfield got on with their business week to week, and slowly but surely they crept up to the title, and it looked in the bag for weeks, maybe months. I would say that stretch, particularly in December, where you looked unflappable while other teams continued to fall over themselves, that was the time where you truly won it.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you. I tweeted out on Saturday night something along the lines of it was a title that was ground out the whole season. There was a stage as well, like in November. I sort of felt like, it was one of those times where the wheels could have very easily gone off the wagon. Losing late at home to Cliftonville felt like a real sucker punch at that stage. But you're so right. There was just spells of this season where the Blues just seemed to tick, tick, tick. Everything was going for them. The teams behind them were dropping points while the Blues were just creeping ahead. And there was one night in particular, I think Glenavon and Ballymena were playing Larne and the Glens, and both those teams took points off the two behind us, and that was just what kept happening all season. And yes, we had to work for it, but I don't think we had much competition, to be quite honest. For a lot of the season, there was teams that huffed and puffed at stages, but listen, it was consistency that won that league title for Linfield, and can't be happier, to be honest.
Looking back, do you think that the way the past two seasons had went shaped Healy's approach to this season? Because those two previous seasons where you didn't win the title, they were still fairly good seasons based on the amount of points that you were able to amass. One of the key frustrations fans had, and some of the criticisms that those Linfield teams of those past two seasons got, was that particularly in games against fellow top six sides, they didn't get over the line enough. They were perhaps too timid, played it safe. And I think this season, Linfield at times have played it safe. They haven't completely deviated from what the DNA of this David Healy team is. But off the back of Cooper staying fit and getting all the goals, you've had good runs for the likes of Fitzpatrick over the past few weeks and months. It was Linfield trying to play mistake-free football, and overall, you knew the size of this squad, the quality of some of the players, that really, particularly the games against the bottom six, they were going to take care of themselves, and that's how it played out. And it was about minimising risk against the top six. And maybe this year, while other teams were in flux, Linfield capitalised.
Couldn't have summed it up any better. Everything went right for the Blues this year. You know, there was small stages in the season where we were maybe without Fitzpatrick or Cooper, suspension or injury reasons, and you know the team sort of managed in the most part to sort of cover for those missing players. Boxing Day and stuff. You know, with I think Fitzpatrick was out for Boxing Day. He was definitely out for the Irish Cup game against the Glens. He's been a massive part of the squad, I have to say. All the play goes through him, and when he's not there, he does look a big miss. But you know, strengthening the squad in January at the level that Healy did was really, really impressive. There's been seasons where you look at the January and he signed, you know, somebody from, I don't know, flipping Texas Buccaneers or something ridiculous, teams you've never heard of, and they're walking out and you're like, who's this guy? But we signed players that we needed. We needed another striker in Kieran Offord, which totally bolstered the squad. Callum Morrison will come through and hopefully be that Cooper replacement. He's chipping in with goals right at the end of the season here. And even signing Rodriguez in this sort of, you know, March time as well. It's something that Linfield never used to do. Linfield sort of pondered and waited, and then the player was away. But where this time they've sort of grabbed that proverbial bull by the horns and pulled in three really decent signings there. Another note that you were just touching on there as well, the performances against the top six. That's where definitely fell down over the past few years. You know, there was games where we drew, where we probably should have won last year. This year that just didn't seem to happen. They just seemed to be able to tick boxes, and even if they did, as been said plenty of times, you know, drop points to the Glens, they still got back on the horse again the week after, and were able to recover where those other teams were having their spikes against us, and just not pressing on. You know, as I said earlier, you know, Cliftonville beat us at Windsor. You know, that should have been maybe a trajectory going upwards for them this season, but just never happened for them. But Linfield have been able to press on in so many different areas and just really yeah, they definitely deserve the title this year. I know that people have argued, you know, there's, as I said there, you know, the competition wise maybe it wasn't great, but you can only beat what's in front of you, and I think they've been able to do that this year.
From a report card point of view, I think there's some people that have come out of this season smelling of roses. Joel Cooper comes off the back of what I think is an all-time solo performance season. You have Fitzpatrick coming out, especially the past few weeks and months, coming out as a main man at Linfield and looking like a top end of this league striker that many of his fans would say he always was. Walsh comes out looking like a new number one for Linfield, or could be someone that we'll look back upon over the next decade and go, do you remember when he played Irish League football, as he goes on what could be a very, very special footballing career? What do you think this season leaves David Healy's legacy? Does it put his reputation amongst the fans on the up? Did he need this style of season to maybe sway some minds after Lorne's double?
You have to look at Healy's sort of previous on this. He went from getting Linfield back to the level where they belong in 2017, and then the next season slipping away to fourth, then won four in a row. He hadn't had to overcome that sort of dynasty that, you know, we've discussed before. Those gaps were 2 years turning into three, then starts becoming a dynasty. You know, Lauren had their double, Lauren had their 2 years in the sun. But Healy having to overcome that, I think that's probably one of his biggest standouts in his career so far, definitely. Now, 2017, I have to say, was probably the most dramatic way that he could have got Linfield back to the title, the way everything went, really for Linfield in that sort of last sort of post-Christmas, really. After Christmas was when things really started to heat up for Linfield that year, or November, where things sort of went really wrong then. But this year, he has just been able to just bat aside any sort of wee sort of shots or wee volleys that are coming at him. He's been able to take them in a stride, and he's been able to, you know, adapt and change things to make Linfield actually better, a more sort of consistent champion. There's been years where, again, that 2017 team always comes to mind, where we won it because of drama. This year, it's just been chipping away, And there's probably been a stage from January where everybody was looking at it and thinking it's just more of a case when than if Linfield win the league. It does nothing but like add another feather to his cap that he turned things around. Past couple of seasons have been pretty disappointing. Yes, won two League Cups in those years. As everybody knows, Linfield don't pride themselves on how many League Cups they've won. It's the league or nothing. And even last year, the disappointment of losing that Irish Cup final. I think I'll ever be as gutted of losing an Irish Cup final like last year. But he's definitely won a lot of people over this year.
You use the word dynasty there, and it's very hard at this stage to see the start of one. When Larne won their first title, there was a question mark of can they go and do it again, and they did it at a canter. I felt last year super strong, very dominant side that played very wide and open football, and we will likely spend time over the next few weeks and months analysing of what went wrong for Larne. But talking about Linfield moving forward and what this team could be on top, win the league, they've invested in this side, they now have the chance to do what Larne did this season and capture some of the riches that European football can deliver. I think some of those signings in January were done with one eye on hitting the ground running when it does come to Europe. Throughout this side, will David Walsh be given the nod long term in goals? We don't know, but if he is, he's at an age where he can progress and grow, and there's definitely a bit of seasoning required there, but he's in a great position. Throughout the side, there's experience that he says about a number of players, and then they are still playing, but how many more years are the likes of Shields and particularly Mulgrew and to a lesser extent Miller have to be a part of this team? And Miller a few, and he is proving to be a vital cog in this machine because of his flexibility and oftentimes his availability. But you have a lot of youth in here as well. Ethan McGee, Matthew Orr likely will supersede this, but you've signed Offord, you've signed Morrison. Looking forward, how much do you think you've got a strong basis to push on next season, or do you worry about a couple of question marks? I'm looking at Cooper. We're all supposed to say that we don't know if he's going to go, but we all know he's 99% leaving. Is he going to stick around? Because we've seen the likes of Finlayson move on previously at that back line. Who else is going to come through? McKee, Allen, there's question marks there in that they've been about, but perhaps are yet to really push on in the way that some Linfield fans would have hoped. What do you think of this team moving into the summer and moving into next year?
We'll probably start with the elephant in the room and that sort of question mark that's not really a question mark anymore. It's that full stop with Joel Cooper finishing up his time with the Blues. Nothing but respect to the guy. He's been an absolute whirlwind for us. He's been so good across these last couple of seasons. Was standing at Dungannon actually a couple of weeks ago, half time, counting the amount of points that he's actually won for us. If it wasn't for his goals and assists, 21 points difference. Now, there's years where that would have, dropped you from first to fourth. This year it would have probably still won us the league, which is, it's nice to sort of laugh at and think about. But 21 points difference is a massive gap for Linfield to actually try and recoup and recover. But with him moving on, nobody's ever going to stay at a football club forever. And I think, as I noted there just a couple of minutes ago there, I think the Blues have done quite well in attempting to replace him at a very early stage. The news was obviously, coming out to us at a later stage than the likes of the dressing room and stuff, I would obviously suggest. But I definitely think it's been a real good sort of setup for running in Europe. There's been times where you're playing your first European game on sort of, second week in July or whatever it is, and there's players making their debuts. I think Healy has become wise to that. And, it's not the best idea for, these new players to be getting game time in games that are totally, detrimental to your season. They have one bad pass against a team from the likes of, I don't know, Norway or something, who are halfway through a season. they're sharp, they're fit, they're ready, and their players have already been 4 or 5 months into the season. I think the signings of Morrison offered and Rodriguez, as I said, it's all about hitting that ground running in Europe. As regards to the Walsh as well, you look at the difference in performance from Linfield have started playing David Walsh from before Chris Johns was in nets, obviously. Now, Johns, I can't fault the guy. The guy has been such a solid goalkeeper for us. But I just think there's some nerves have crept in. There's something has definitely crept in there in sort of the last year and a half. I would say he's not been as sound and solid as he has been. He was playing the game against Crusaders on Tuesday week ago, and he just looked shaky. He did look like a guy who had been short of confidence, whereas David Walsh has come in and has took that jersey and took it in his stride almost as if he was meant to be there, sort of like 5 years ago. Absolutely incredible start for him. But then going to the other end of the spectrum as well, you say about Shields and Mulgrew and Miller. I think if you were doing this podcast in 2014, you'd have been asking the question, how many years has Mulgrew actually got? You look at his run on Saturday for the second goal and chipping in to Kirk Miller at the back post. Miller's been a winger who never really relied on electric pace all the time. It wasn't this sort of instant burst of pace. It's what he does with that ball at his feet. And he's been absolutely extraordinary for us over the past sort of nearly 10 years. Kirk Miller's been at Linfield, believe it or not. He's chipping in at wing back at the minute, which I obviously don't think is his best position. I don't think there's anybody thinks that's his best position. But he's chipping away there and he's working twice as hard as a lot of players would be if they'd been moved back position wise.
Do you see Healy sticking around long term? He's done what he wanted to do, aimed to do, and that was to return and bring this club back to the summit of Irish League football. Hasn't been a 10 out of 10 perfect season, and we'll get on to some of the things that didn't go exactly right for him, but it's almost strange to look back and remember that this all could have happened very differently if, was it August, early September time, when there was chat of him and Wraith Rovers. There was a point that he was gone. It was done.
Yeah, it was all sort of chat about who was going to replace him, which is very, very difficult, to be honest. Not really one that we actually wanted to, have to be doing halfway through a season. You've seen how that's affected Lauren halfway through a season. Totally disjoints the whole thing and makes everything a lot more difficult to even think about going on runs in the league and cups and all that when you're changing your manager halfway through a season, especially when they're winning. But yeah, definitely for a stage it looked like Healy was gone. There was times I was just ready to sort of accept that it was all over. But I think it sort of took a bit of a massive turnaround contract wise and money wise, sort of get him to stay. There's definitely been a change in performance from after the whole sort of debacle with contracts and stuff. Obviously, I'm delighted that he stayed with us because he's been a manager who I'm very tough on the manager at Linfield. I grew up watching David Jeffrey, and he could do no wrong for so many years. But I think everybody's tough on a manager at Linfield. They demand, as I said earlier, the league or nothing sort of thing. Second doesn't get you anywhere. I think he's done a tremendous job this year in turning around that deficit between us and Lauren over the past couple of years.
Do you think it's a when rather than an if Healy moves on from the club? Because by all accounts, like we said, it was almost there. He changed his mind. It's hard to really tell if that was the right call or not. It was a signal of intent, a signal of ambition. You mentioned David Jeffrey there. He stayed on for Linfield for years and years and years and years, and he won so many trophies. It's maybe just age, it's maybe just the fact that time's moving a lot faster than it did when we were younger. But Healy has amassed a massive amount of league titles.
He's done himself no harm in staying at Linfield. There was always talk. Every year there seems to be a different sort of random club in England that sticks their nose out and says, "Oh, we want David Healy." It was Grimsby for a while, and with all respect to Grimsby, you're not gonna be winning league titles. He's gonna be in relegation dogfights in either England or the Championship in Scotland. It's not gonna be all roses and championships and title wins if you go over there. And I think that's maybe something that maybe left him to sort of stay here. But you're looking at an age where managers, look at Southampton's manager today, for example, in the Premier League, 100 odd days, and they're gone because they haven't turned a sinking ship around straight away. You're looking where in an age where it's all system management. It's not actually, you know, there's so many managers now just play a system. And you look at how Dean Shields made that work Dungannon. It often didn't work, and it seemed stubborn to stick with the system. Healy has stuck with his system, but there's times where he tweaks it and it all works out okay. But there's definitely times where the system sort of looks a bit ropey. But I definitely think it was just a statement of him to say, I'm just not staying here just because it says Linfield above the door. His allegiance, of course, is to Linfield for wherever, however long that takes for him. But it's not a lifetime contract, and he's definitely well within his rights to chat the other clubs. Did I like it when it was happening? Of course I didn't. But I think it was definitely a stage for him where he was sort of saying to the board and saying to, fans, I don't have to stay here. If this sort of rot continues and if there's other people wanting me, why would I stay, sort of thing. I definitely think the board sort of took a lot of stick from me, especially. I was not a fan at the time, sort of felt like he sort of used that sort of wraithful thing to get a bit more money out of the club, and I wasn't really keen on that. But comes around the end of the season and the Irish League's back where it belongs, it's all rosy again. But there's definitely, when you say if not when, I'd be of the opinion that Healy wants to be the first Linfield manager in Europe, in European group stage. I really believe that. You
look what it did for Lynch.
Well, look what it did for an Ireland. It sort of buckled their whole season after their manager left, sort of thing. We were all but an away goal away from going to the Europa League. We were a flipping Jimmy Gallagher clearance away from going to the Conference League. We've been so close twice now, and Europa League will never happen again, just based on the way the whole season works. But Conference League's 100% on this year if we can press on.
What's the expectation level? Comes to it, is it if Long can do it, so can we? It's oftentimes a lucky draw is what's required. You have better chance of that due to Linfield being seeded, and that'll be something we'll talk about in the coming weeks. But it's now game on, and that competition is obviously a cup competition. You have to get through the round, and that's where we get to. It isn't all rosy looking back at the report card for this entire team. How much do you believe those results against Glentoran and really not coming within a sniff of any other trophy this season, how much is that a blight, or was it such a defined goal to win the league that really everything else was just a distraction?
I wouldn't say that everything else was a distraction. I'd definitely say it would have been nice to win those trophies. But if you were sitting talking to me on the first weekend in May, and we'll be saying, oh, Linfield have won the Irish Cup, but they've not won the league, I'd be slightly gutted. Irish Cup's lovely. It's great to win the Irish Cup. Nice to win the League Cup. County Antrim Shield's a County Antrim Shield. If you win it, you win it. You don't, you don't. But I think you have to say that, Linfield's main aim this season was the league, and Linfield achieved their main aim. Now, you're talking about losses against Glentoran. Yes, those losses against Glentoran were certainly demoralising from a fan's perspective, but nearly made it just as nice, even sweeter, I would say, being able to beat them on Saturday and finally get that cursed monkey off the back, sort of thing, where we hadn't beat the Glens all season, and we finally sort of proved ourselves. Hold on, they're actually not as good as they have been against us this year. They're a beatable team. Every team in that league's beatable. You talk about it every week in this podcast about shocks and things going left, right, and centre in this league. Every team in this league's beatable. Nobody is flawless in any stage of this league. But again, you look at the report card. I never actually got to see the Blues in Europe this year because I was away the 1 week that we were playing at home, and I didn't fancy a trip to Iceland. It just didn't work out for us in Europe this year. But I definitely hope that this summer we're sort of chatting about Linfield in Europe well into the late weeks of August.
You saw Linfield do something they haven't done in recent times, and that be fairly aggressive in the transfer window. I'm talking about getting out that checkbook. Perhaps some of the summer deals were done in January for all the reasons we have talked about. What does your gut tell you? What do you think fan expectation will be? Do you think now that Linfield have the title in their back pocket, will they really go for it and add and be aggressive, or will they keep and stick to the current process?
I don't think we've really ever seen Linfield sort of be extremely aggressive in the transfer market like we saw them in January. It took the whole Joel Cooper rumours for Linfield to actually grab that bull by the horns again and say, we need to sign. Because let's be quite honest, in this league, it used to be you played for your sort of smaller, not top two club. And if one of the big boys came calling, it was just yes, instant straight away, oh, we'll go to Linfield, we'll go to Glentoran. Now we're looking at teams across the country that have more, if the same, if not more money than Linfield. We have teams that have more European experience than Linfield. Lauren, we have,
Or at least the motivation to pay more than
yeah,
Linfield
of
would feel
course,
comfortable
of
with
course,
paying.
yeah. I don't think there's anybody in this country that's going to say that Linfield are a wee poor club with the begging bowl. Like Linfield have money, but it's how how it's being chose to be spent. There's other teams that are, as you say, they're straight away. There's a big offer on the table straight away. Linfield will sort of tease you with the two or three smaller ones before they put the big one on the table by the looks of it. But Linfield in that sort of summer window, it just all happened. Sorry, the winter window, it all just happened straight away. There was no sort of warming up period. It was just Kieran offered coming to Linfield, and there's the price, and there's what's happening. I'd say Cruise fans weren't happy with that, of course. Like that was a really, really crazy, sort of an instant signing. I keep talking about this Rodriguez boy, but even the way that all went down for Linfield, there was rumor, photos of this Spanish guy who had played for Motherwell or whatever, playing, training for Linfield. You never heard of Linfield signing anybody off the free agents. It was a very football manager move, I thought. Here's a free agent and he's training really well for us. Let's snap him up before anybody gets their eyes on him. Linfield hadn't been like that in the past few years, but this summer, as so many people say, you're never going to know until it's actually out there. We will be the last ones to know, is what I mean. We'll be David Healy and that whole team will have singled out, all these players, and you know yourself, it'll all be sort of done behind closed doors before it's even anywhere near a paper.
It all seems so easy to look back and go, well, Linfield were always in with a shout of taking this league back, and they can return now to being the top team in the country once again, and maybe they'll go on another run. Surely the past couple of seasons, and there's been times the double for Cliftonville, the 3 and 4 for the Cruise, so there's been times where they aren't winning the league every year. But surely the past 2 seasons and Lauren's ascendancy, a lesson could and maybe should be learnt and has been learnt from Linfield, that to not take them lightly, which I think they did originally at the start, and Lauren were able to build themselves up, do the deals, maybe be more aggressive in the transfer window, pick up the players, and that ultimately led to success that we've not seen in this league previously by getting into Europe. Linfield have got the checkbook out. Look, they've made signings over the years, but these were big deals that they were signing, right? And this is from a team who only a season and a half, 2 years ago, before they were signing Fitzpatrick, they're clutching their pearls over, what do you mean we have to pay this much? That was protracted on, and here's Linfield coming out. We go into this summer, a really interesting summer in the Irish League in regards to just money, new teams coming forward, how will this Korean project work out, how will Lauren react as they try to seek stability and go again. Korean are getting talked about in the paper almost every other day because they are being, and it's the word I've used in this podcast already, aggressive. They're signing top names. They are investing in them through transfer fees. They are giving them, by all accounts, very healthy packages to make that move. As a Linfield fan, yes, you may think, it's not all going to work out. We've seen the improvement in Coleraine since January, and you'd wonder if they had some of those players since August, maybe had a bit more time with their coach, where would they be now? Do you think, as a Linfield fan, you've got one eye on this Coleraine project, thinking, we've seen this movie before?
I wouldn't actually say we've seen this movie before. Lauren came in with a lot of relative unknowns in the Irish League. Who had heard of Andy Ryan before he started banging them in against your local team? Who had honestly, in a show of hands for people who had heard of Andy Ryan, fair play to you. Coleraine are going for the proverbial jugular here. There's rumour Fod Sula, Stephen Fallon, Joel Cooper, and they've already signed, X, Y, and Z across the league. I think the one that is actually, shows that these guys aren't messing about is Dunn. I have never ever seen a player for Coleraine or for any other team in the Irish League centre half just absolutely brilliant. Every single Linfield player, a 2-0 win for Linfield. Yeah, one of our worst days of the season, I have to say, performance wise. But the performance from that Coleraine back four, especially Dunn, was absolutely extraordinary. If they can persuade that guy to stay, I would be extremely worried. He is a Virgil van Dijk kind of signing, if you want to put it in that Premier League term. He takes that whole team from being good to being absolutely excellent. If they keep him, that's, we're really dealing with a dangerous beast here in that Coleraine side of things. I just don't think that you'd have to see it on the pitch before you'd actually say, this is going to be really, really, it's going to be flawless. It's not going to be flawless. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be bumps along this road for them. And it's not going to be easy. But if they are able to, turn these big star names into, a really, really slick team, all these players added on top of what is already a top 6 team in the league. It's not like this isn't the Larne takeover where they were mid-table and the championship and then pushing their way up. Coleraine are already, let's say 75% of the way there from Larne. They've already got that springboard. Larne have to do a lot of hard work to actually get into the Irish League. They had a year and a half of struggle in the championship before they got up and started pressing on. It's one that I'd be worried about. I'd definitely be more worried about Coleraine than the Glens or the of course Larne. They'd be the ones that would be worrying me most, to be quite honest, Peter. You're looking at that, how things are going and how, there's rumours left, right and centre. Every other day about Larne, you hear something different. I feel like that's been the crest of their wave, and it's maybe going to slow down into, a similar season to this year. It's not all plain sailing every week. The Glens, nobody really knows what the Glens are going to do from week to week. There's weeks the Glens come out and they've absolutely boss teams, but again, there's performances and you're just looking at them like, well, what has actually changed over the past 3 or 4 years? It seems to be very, very samey for the Glens. They're close at some stage in the season and it all just falls down when it comes to the business end. But definitely Coleraine would be the one I'd be worried about coming in the next season.
You mentioned Coleraine there. That's where we expect Cooper to go. I think you touched upon it earlier and I agree. I think this exit has overall, he's nailed the landing of it. I feel fans have been very accepting of it. What will that feel like next season when he's the one scoring goals past you, maybe scoring in big games that you need Coleraine not to get victories in? We'll have to see. But like that's the nature of football. I've said it over the past number of weeks, and it's not a controversial opinion that Joel Cooper is the player of the season, and we are moving towards awards ceremony within the league. We used to have the NI Football Awards, which was a joint venture with NIFL and the Football Writers. They have went their separate ways. We're going to have these NIFL awards, and you're going to have the Northern Ireland Football Writers. So, the Football Writer Awards, the award with the heritage. We also have, Ulster Player of the Year, which is done by Castlereagh Glentoran Football Supporters Club. So, with this new NIFL Awards, we got some of the nominees this week. It's a panel of 6 people, which is out there, and you can read for yourself, that have helped pick these. And I think perhaps they'll also be the people that decide the winners as well. I've been thinking myself over the past number of weeks, because you expect, at least in the way we do things, that you kind of have a panel of 3 for every award: young player, manager, etc. So I've been thinking, right, so if Cooper is the runaway player of the year, you still have to give the other 2 spots as nominees, even though that it's all academic. So for the NIFL ones, the other 2 nominees are, at least to my surprise slightly, it's not like they've come out of nowhere, Fitzpatrick and Matthew Shevlin. I tweeted out saying, I do have thoughts, but with 2 Linfield players on there, what are your thoughts, Mr. McGuiggan, on that category? I'm sure we'll talk about the other ones, but in that one in particular, mainly the other 2 nominees besides Cooper.
Yeah, like, you can't argue. Matthew Steven's top goal scorer in the league. He's definitely had a good season. Has he had his very best season? No. There's been games where he's been totally anonymous. There's been, times you've watched him and you've sort of forgot he was ever on. Fitzpatrick, soft spot, massive soft spot. I sort of felt like I was a bit of a cheerleader for Fitzpatrick for a time at the Blues where, he wasn't getting. He's scored 12 goals this year. I think something like 16 to 18 goal involvements in all competitions. For a striker at a top level, it's probably, he's in there. 12 goals is in between Joe McGovern and Ben Kennedy. Definitely not a bad sandwich to be a part of as such. 2 very, very high quality players, but he hasn't been like this runaway goal scorer. The one that I was surprised that I wasn't seeing on that list, Joe Gormley, has had an absolutely excellent season across all competitions. This is obviously just the league, but I think Gormley, for his age, absolutely extraordinary. What a season he's having. Rolling back the years at some stages, and there's been times where he's nearly unplayable at times, to be quite honest. Just the way he grinds goals out, and yeah, I can see how people would be arguing with it, but I mean, like, Joel Cooper's player of the season, I totally agree with you there. There's no doubt on that.
Like, it's not a travesty. Let's be real. However, I look at those nominees, and I feel as though it's Joel Cooper, the clear player of the season. You then have, who's currently, and that may change, it's likely to change just based on games and whatever, and just could, Matthew Shevlin as one nominee, and then Fitzpatrick, which I would argue is probably recency bias in that, and where I would feel quite strongly that actually the player of the year is Cooper. The other nominee should absolutely be Yolai. And then if you're to have the third, it would be a toss-up in my eyes between Gormley, Bigorama, and probably John McGovern. John McGovern perhaps has had more flashier plays, more impressive because he's doing it in the Dungannon team. Bigorama probably doesn't get the kudos because he's more defensive and isn't getting the highlight plays, and the people aren't watching Dungannon week in or week out. It just depends how he played against your team. And then Joe Gormley, he's got the goals. There was that decent stretch where he was out, but he scored all types of goals. The argument might be that, yes, he scored goals, but it's for a relatively poor Cliftonville team who hasn't had a huge amount of success on the pitch, bar the fact that he is the man that scored the goal in the final and has scored some big goals for them. So that's where I look at it and go, I don't think Shevlin and Fitzpatrick would be in my top 5. Forget my top 3.
Definitely not. Like, there's names there that you mentioned that I'd sort of be gutted that if those names weren't on the team of the year. That's when things sort of get a bit ridiculous. If GLI has not been the best goalkeeper in this league, and you choose someone else, I definitely think something's going wrong there. Even as a blue man, totally pains me to say it. I'd buy him in the morning. If his contract was up and there was money, I'd take him. I'd take him tomorrow, and I'd be singing his praises. It seemed strange. I see where you're coming from. It's definitely not. It's definitely not like a really rogue player. It's not like they're saying that some sort of youth player who's played 3 games is on there, but yeah, it's definitely a few rogue choices.
It's slightly change up. This year you have for manager of the year. There's a manager in every single division except the top flight, where there's two, where it's Healy and the man who will be manager of the year, Rodney McRae.
I can't argue with that. Rodney McGuiggan made a massive turnaround at Dungannon, and I, uh, I always say Dungannon are one of the toughest teams that we always play against. Obviously, a wee bit of a slide off this sort of last. There's maybe only 4 wins in the last 15 or 16, I believe. Um, but that's because the last couple of games have been against top six teams as well. But what he's done down there is incredible. I don't watch enough sort of third division to say that, Gary Boyle's a good or bad manager. Lee Feeney, of course, doing a great job at Bangor as well, but I think him and Healy are only there because the one that, that they're gonna win the league, so they have to be manager of the season sort of thing.
Yeah, Guy Boyle, pulling through with 1 point, obviously ex Newry manager. You have Championship Player of the Year, Ben Arthurs for Bangor, Laurie for Limavady, McClellan for the Welders. You'd fully expect Ben Arthurs to be that Bangor hero. Intermediate, Aaron Duke, Donningstown, previously with Loughgall and Portadown. Rory
On the Cash
Fitzpatrick's in
Rangers, of
there.
course.
Yeah, that's true. And then Jim O. Hanlon, he's ex Glens, who's come in and scored plenty of goals for Warren Point from midfield. You have a few extra awards in here, Heart of the Club, for volunteers and the such. You've got female contribution to professional football and NI, club marketing campaign. Yep. Club employee excellent award. You've got community initiative, and the one, oh yes, goal of the season. Another one which I think was, you have one and then you can just add in the other ones. You have Ahi Ubakan, who scored against Cliftonville in February. Kind of the weird flick. Wasn't exactly Burrows-esque, but it's kind of similar, more side footy. You've got McCartan's big long punt against Larne, and then Jordan Jenkins against Cliftonville in August. Any that you think's a big miss from that list?
Kirk Miller on Saturday just for the celebration. No, honestly, I think Jenkins is a winner in it.
Oh,
Jenkins.
it's great.
Oh,
It's great. It's Jordan Jenkins. It's like,
100%.
the flick over and then he hits it, and that's kind of what he's like as a player. And I kind of like that about Jenkins as a player. He's a man that just has that velocity when he swings his boot and makes a connection with the ball. We saw that on Saturday, but I think that's been the goal of the season for a while. The other three ones are funny. It's like, how good is caught the keeper off his line kind of goals? People will question that. The Ubacan one is like, did he mean it? But it looks quite good. Again, I've talked about this numerous times in the podcast before. Goalkeeper Oscar, that, because it was so
Just
outstretched.
going down for it, like,
He,
yeah,
he,
I know.
he flicked back going, oh, where'd it go? And then that really helped there. So they're the awards actually happening next Saturday. So, that's before the season's over. But I mean, the season's kind of pretty much over anyway, so that's grand. The NA Football Writers won, I believe they're the Sunday after the Irish Cup. For the games that did go down on Saturday, we talked about it. Linfield, Glentoran. Glentoran still fighting to try and get this second place. Linfield are just extending this points total of them. Are you surprised that the Blues are just continuing to go on a tear?
I think they had to win on Saturday, to be honest. Won last Tuesday night with sort of the B team as such out. Made 11 changes and, brought the sort of first teamers on as and when they required them. But had to win on Saturday because I can remember, can't mind what season it was. There's been so many league titles. We lost 4-0 to Glenavon on Trophy Day, and I don't think there's anything more, dampening of the spirits than getting absolutely pumped on Trophy Day. We also had to beat the Glens on Saturday, which is, it had to be done this season. Couldn't have gone the whole season without beating the Glens. Um, I don't think we're going to see, it's not going to be a points tally record this season from the Blues. So I wouldn't be playing all those big boys and risking somebody getting injured for Europe. That would sort of be my imagination of things. You get somebody does their ACL or something silly in the last couple of games of the season, they're out for those European games, which is real, or out for the start of preseason as well, which is no use. I'd expect big rotation in the next 3 games.
Well, a side who is playing their big boys, getting big results, despite the fact that they are probably, some might argue, trying to avoid injury themselves, is Cliftonville. They've turned it on. That's a big week for them. 2 wins and are looking very close to sewing up this 7th place with a bit of time to spare.
I think it was maybe like a pipe dream for those other teams to even suggest that they'd be anywhere close to Cliftonville in that bottom 6. But yeah, 2 absolute brilliant performances from them to start off. What could have been a real sort of tricky, heads down attitude, but Gilton's managed to actually get them playing some really, really good stuff so far in this sort of bottom half. One Iron Irish Cup final, yes, but guaranteed European playoff would be something that they'd prefer, I would suggest.
Yeah, Danny Gibson gets a goal just midweek because it's Tuesday games we didn't get to talk about. Get the early lead for Carrick, and you're thinking, here comes the fight back for them. Are Cliftonville going to be down and out? But since that goal they conceded early on, they then go back, win 3-1. Nice little goal for Mr. Mick Woods. He had more than one goal. Actually grabbed 3 across the week, but a lot of people were hyping up his goal against Carrick for the big, long, mazy run that he did there. So 2 big points, 2 big wins for them, and particularly that game on Saturday, because they're up against Ballymena, a team who could dislodge them from 7th, a team for Ballymena who had really stretched out their muscles on Tuesday, thumping a Loughgall side who really could have done without getting thumped. Jim Irvin follows that up with getting himself a nice wee 3-year deal as manager extended, and they sign off what could have been a really excellent week by getting pumped 5-0 at Solitude. A particularly bad final 10-12 minutes from Ballymena, but based on highlights alone, Cliftonville just looked like they kept going and going and going, and were just trying to score as many as they could, and they grabbed a bunch.
Yeah, just definition of a pumping for them, unfortunately. 3 goals in the last 10 or 12 minutes, as you said there. It's sort of, once that third one goes in is when the heads seem to have gone down there. Like a really, really random signing, McWoods was. He's actually turning out to be quite a decent striker. We'll find out how well that goes next season for them. Yes, Ballymena have got pumped 5.
Yeah, I wonder, is he going to be... He's almost playing himself into maybe being a part of the team next year, just depending on how they fare in the transfer window.
Well, let's be honest. You talk about it all the time. Cliftonville lost like 50 plus goals in last summer's transfer window.
I literally do not think I've got through one episode without mentioning it.
It's a very common topic, but it is
a common topic.
They need to replace the goals somehow, and if it's going to come from McWoods or whoever it is, Cliftonville fans can't be annoyed at that. 3 goals in 2 games, definitely not a bad start for him. But I don't think there's any Ballymena fans that can argue that Jim hasn't done enough to deserve a contract. Let's remember, it was only October time when we were talking Ballymena for the Gibson Cup and all that. Elephant up a tree scenario, as we know, it's always going to fall down. But where they were at the end of last season, they were a goal, 2 goals maybe away from going back down. Was it penalties? I can't quite remember.
No,
it wasn't.
No,
penalties.
it was a late comeback.
Yeah, okay, against Institute. So honestly, one of those seasons where there's been so much football, you can't really remember what happened at the tail end of last season. But anyway, it's a very
strange end of the season. It's such a weird end of the season. But the season that we've had has felt like 2 seasons smashed into one, full of twists and turns and dramas and storylines. Look, it's a big sign
Yeah,
of intent for the board at Ballymena, because Jim Irvin was a part of that season last year. A return to investing in the club happened during the summer, and many times coaches in that position are kind of lame ducks, because there's a feeling that if there's going to be a big push and a big change off the back of not particularly a great amount of success, there's going to be a feeling of, is he the man moving forward? And he doesn't start the season particularly well, then goes on a tear, then falls off, and is able to somewhat stabilise towards the end. And there might be some who would question, going, will the real Jim Irvin please stand up? But clearly Ballymena, the people in there putting the money behind this, have liked what they've seen and are backing him to continue on this project. So that's a clear sense of direction for Ballymena. That's really clearing up that this is the man in charge that's going to take over a huge amount of direction of where they go and where they push on. It's just not. It's just a bad look for the players, because they were still in it, weren't they? Ballymena, if they were able to get a victory there, they were still in it, and this kills off their season. And for Cliftonville to get their noses in front in the way they have in that battle for seventh, killing teams off like this is just going to make that easier, so that they might have the ability to kind of chill out once or twice before the cup final. Good wins for them. Weird week for Loughgall, a bad week overall for Loughgall. We knew that this was coming, and it is still not 100% assured, but I mean, it's as nailed on can be. And from beating Ballymena the week or two before, pre-split, they then get that tanking, and he just did not have the slippage to get that tanking. And it really doesn't matter if they got beat 30-0. Well, it would actually on goal difference, but you know what I'm saying here. The 5-2 looks bad, right? But it really doesn't impact them when it comes to the table. Then I was at that Glenavon Loughgall game. Glenavon and Loughgall, but particularly Loughgall, were very poor, and they were actually able to sneak the 3 points against Glenavon, but it's all for nothing because Portadown capitulated against Carrick. I have said this for a number of weeks, pretty much all season. I think when it comes to the 12th team in the league, Loughgall have an argument for being the best ever 12th place team, based on the quality of play, being exciting, what they brought to the league, just some of the endeavour that this side has. Watching them on Saturday, I had this feeling, or at least a view, where I started to worry, because I hype up all these players, and I've talked about how maybe a lot of the teams in the top flight next year will look and go, ooh, thank you very much, I like the look of this, like the look of that. They did not have a particularly great day despite getting that win, and Loughgall are down because they need Carrick to lose all of their games. Loughgall have to win all their games, and it's 20 plus goals, the difference. That again was not helped by the fact that Carrick pumped the points.
Massive outlier for that Carrick one. You know what's that? 25 goals in the previous 34 games, as far as I can work out, and then they go out and score 4 against Portadown on Saturday. So that's based on some very quick maths. 13% of all the season's goals scored on Saturday. That's a massive turnaround, massive turnaround for the books. Wasn't expecting that at all. But yeah, totally agree. You know, Loughgall's sort of soft spot for me, but just there wasn't that, as you say, there wasn't that gap like Newry were last year. Or whatever, two years ago, maybe that was. No, it was last year.
Year
Newry
before,
just were miles off.
point.
Miles off. Yeah, but that was Doolan. Doolan sort of wrecked. Portadown really only had half a season that season. The rest of it was totally pointless, nearly. Well,
almost.
Pardon the
Yeah.
pun. Pardon the pun. But Loughgall have looked in spells like a team that deserved to be in this league, but just there's just been so many games where it's just slipped away slightly. There hasn't been too many, games where you've said, they look miles off. They gave Linfield a very, very good game down at Lakeview in October, I can remember, on a Friday night. A really, really good game there. Lost 1-0 at Windsor. You know, it's been small margins. It's not been these sort of massive, waves and waves of games where they can't even get a kick in a game. And I think Murphy's going to have a job in his hands. That championship is so difficult. This is if they go down. It's sort of like nearly saying, I bet you Christmas
If
will.
Joe Cooper leaves and joins Coleraine.
It's sort of spoof. I'm gutted for them because they were really good. They were really good last year. Really enjoyable to watch. But it just proves that despite that good year last year, it's all about how you follow it up the next year.
It'll be interesting to see if they can bounce back, not because of what players they have here, but we just haven't seen it. Like, there's been a number of reasons why Warren Point haven't returned. Yeah, Portadown bounced back, but they're a club the size that they are. Newry have had, again, this is just the end of a particularly bad double spell, and look, here come Bangor after whatever it is, more than a decade and a half out of the top flight, and Loughgall had almost a very similar stretch out of the league, and it's not like when it comes to, well, this is the first time they were ever in the top 12 league. They were slipping about when there were 16 teams. So as we even are still seeing now, this championship is brutal, and you need to be able to build a squad of the right type of players who can get the job done and deal with that consistency. And oftentimes that's not a project that you can quickly turn around within a year, because you're going against teams who have been building and built. Like this Bangor side was not built in a season. It's been marinating over a couple of seasons, and look, Institute came up last year doing very well near the top of the division and could have been playing top flight football if that playoff against Ballymena was different, and here they are this season, not even in the top six in the championship. So will we see Loughgall? I think, based on the fact that there is a lot of talent in that almost mid-Ulster area, and that maybe could filter down to Loughgall, and with Darren Murphy, he's going to come in and have his own ideas. Maybe it's good to have that new fresh era with him. I just really don't know how much of that side will stick around, and maybe how much of them sticking around is in fact a good thing for them when they want to freshen things up for a run, because the ambition will be that they're playing top flight football in 26, 27. So that's a long-term ambition to be back there. And I like the appointment of Darren Murphy, local to the area, has spent a lot of time watching the league. I think knows it inside out, and does have a huge amount of contacts, and that's sometimes the hardest part to have. We're yet to see many people coming through as outsiders having success, and perhaps what Stuart King was talking about last week about how important it is to know everybody, and they're a great auntie in the league. That's probably one of the benefits that Darren Murphy has. That then means Carrick will be in the playoff now against one of, and here comes Anna United, Limavady, the Welders, or the Anna, and the Anna are the team with the momentum. Could they be in a position to be, would it be a third playoff in 4 seasons if they were to get it?
Two very tight ones. I can remember the Portadown one was very tight.
Dungannon won, a Portadown one, then it
Institute Ballymena
was
last year, so you're on for 3. Yeah, 3 and 4 is certainly nothing to be sniffed at. I feel like the Welders, the Welders were there all season, and they've sort of,
yeah, they're kind of blowing a bit, aren't they? Potentially,
like you have a big game on Saturday. No, sorry, Easter Saturday. That game is between Bangor and the Welders, but Bangor could be high and dry, before that all happens. So you're then looking at the last couple of games. Welders have already played, Anna, so it's all going to come down to these last 3 games, and nice to actually have a league with a bit of excitement in it, isn't it, Peter? This whole
championship is doing what it did last year.
The whole premiership's just boring. The championship's maybe the one to be at.
The fun game is the Friday one, Bangor against Anna at Clandy Boy, which has just been a bonkers fixture this season. And as well as at the championship, you look down below, this Newington Newry battle to try and just get a playoff place in 11th in the league is almost as fascinating. Welders host Dundela then on Saturday. Bangor and the Welders, as you said, that's a big fight. The Anna take on Limavady. I mean, that's a winner take all kind of game there. And then the final day of the season, who do we see? Welders and Limavady. I mean, is that a hope and pray for a draw for the Anna if they get there? And that's of course assuming that Bangor do seal the title, and I think based on their victory on Saturday, well, sorry, they actually drew against the Mavaria. That's kind of helped them along the line. So again, we will keep our eyes peeled on that. But so yeah, Carrick, they're scoring goals now. You know, they would like to play Port every week. They score a lot of goals. I mean, Albert Watson scored a chip.
Albert Watson's
and outpace an opposite defender. I mean, that his best goal he ever scored. I don't think he was.
Has there ever been another goal?
Pace in his 20s.
Yeah, Albert Watson was one of my flipping Linfield heroes back in the day before he went to Canada. I might have a Linfield shirt somewhere with Albert Watson in the back of it. I definitely had it. I don't know where it is anymore, I think. But yeah, great player. I always admired a lot. Massive longevity as well. You know, saying like that's what 15 odd years ago. I probably had that shirt, and he's still kicking about in the Irish League. Great player.
For Carrick, look, we know it has not been an excellent season for them. They've struggled to recover at any point in the year 2025. They've only been able to secure 9 points in the league, and will face an absolute battle when they go into that championship playoff, or the promotion relegation playoff. They took 3 points off them on Saturday. Another team who's had a very, very poor 2025 are the Ports. They've only got 13 points, so 4 more points than Carrick this calendar year. Yeah, Carrick have had one more game in the league. That's not great reading, particularly for a side who were hoping to be in the top 6. Were second on Christmas Day. They've fallen off a cliff. And there's almost been this distraction, it feels, if you talk to Portadown fans, where half of them, looking back on the way 2025 has went, where half of them are saying this has been poor, it hasn't been good enough, and then the other half say, let's have a bit of perspective here, and at least we're not threatened with relegation. Oftentimes, these kind of runs can transfer into next year. I think it would be a massive overreaction to the end of the season. And like Niall Curry was talking about how some players weren't really up to the standards he felt they should be. But, I mean, would you understand if there was some Portadown fans saying that Curry's feeling a bit of pressure?
I doubt there's actually a manager in that league who doesn't feel pressure. Potentially, maybe Rodney McAree is the only one who's, well, obviously Jim Irvin now, who isn't going into every game thinking, you know, I need to win this. You know, it's you know, do or die in this league, and it always has been, always will be. Perspective wise, you know, you have to remember when Curry took Portadown over for the second time around, it was already a downhill spiral, and it had already sort of been a season that was almost written off by the time he actually got the job. Now, getting out of that championship last year was no mean feat either, I have to say. You know, did a lot of things really, really well. I always said, and I've said it like 6 times in this podcast or however many I've been on, he didn't stick to his guns from the team that brought him up from the championship. He made wholesale changes, and maybe it's, you know, that it shows this season, you know, as you say, the second of Christmas for Portadown, nearly unheard of in the last sort of, you know, what, 20 years, or whenever Portadown last won the league. I can't quite, it's before my time, as the man says. But it's definitely not been a season to forget, but it's definitely not been a season to just totally, you know, rant and rave about. It's very similar to Ballymena in a way, you know. It was sort of, you know, this whole high flying season, high flying start and all this, and it's sort of come back down to earth with a bit of a bump again. I can see why he's under. I wouldn't say he's under like massive pressure. He's not under like Dean Smith pressure, before everything happened. But yeah, definitely if you were grading this, it would be like a C or a B minus. Do you know what I mean? It's not brilliant, but it's certainly not been a failure of a season for him.
I think the Jim Irvin comparisons are fairly apt going into next term, and it's the same for, like you said, a lot of sides. Look, Stuart King, you're probably alluding to it. Highest points total. He listed off all those things last week. Points total, goals, position in the league was gone by October. So everybody's in that position. I wonder, and we'll spend time in the next few weeks talking about that. I wonder what a team like Portadown's expectations are next year. It might be then to try and go one more and get seventh or finish sixth. I say get seventh because it looks as though they've kind of snookered themselves based on that they drew against Glenavon on Tuesday at home and then can't beat out Carrick, and then they've got to play against Ballymena and Cliftonville, and maybe Cliftonville will fall off and it'll be a big swing, but they've made it very, very difficult for themselves. And then Loughgall is obviously the final game they have there. On top of that, going back up into the top half of the league, does anybody want this second place?
I don't think either of them are that interested. Like, I just think they want to be involved in that playoff. They just want to mess about in that playoff. Is the plan for them? Get a bit more fans through the doors, a bit more revenue at the end of the season. They're fighting over it.
Like Dungannon could have been a dark horse, but as much as they thought they were the far better side against Larne, they aren't able to get themselves across the line in that game on Tuesday night. Then they a couple of mistakes at the back, fight back, but in the end, what a wonderful goal. What a brilliant piece of skill. I do believe Jimmy Glacken is one of the most underrated players in this league. I imagine can be frustrating to watch, both as a supporter and as someone watching him. But when he is on fire, he is very difficult to play against, and he has goals like that on Saturday in his locker.
He has done for the past, maybe 5 or 6 years. Really, really solid player. It's just the consistency issue. I think if I was a Korean fan, he's one of those players who just loves the bits. But if he could do it every week, you'd be flying, absolutely flying. But yeah, must say, a great goal.
That pretty much knocks out the Swifts, right? Of maybe being sneaky and getting up in towards second, which would have been an unbelievable end of that season. And they have the Irish Cup to worry about themselves, and failing an Irish Cup win, they'll have another go at the European playoffs. So they have numerous bites of the cherry, and let's talk about perspective for them as well. And you would maybe say if they can find a bit more form again, and look, they look decent enough against, like I said, Larne at times, and against Coleraine at times, have just faltered in the big moments. Coleraine, that game against Glentoran, that is a fumble, isn't it? Because they didn't have the room, or don't have the room, to slip by and to give those 3 points to a team like Glentoran, who are high up there in second. Is slipping up against Dungannon probably would have been better of the two options if you can really choose. And they had the opportunities as well when it comes to the penalties up at the Oval. I think that Coleraine result could be one of the more, for Glentoran, pivotal results of this split. But you still, technically, it's not Loughgall out of it technically, but you can't truly rule out Coleraine. But if you are a fan of the Bandsiders, you're essentially looking at numerous times this season thinking, if we had just had composure, or not thrown it away late in Game X in October, September, whenever, we could be on for second here.
It's been the definition of a mixed bag for Coleraine as well. There's 10
but
draws.
The highs are really high.
Yeah, the highs are ridiculously high. Winning away at Windsor Park doesn't happen every season for Coleraine. Second joint most draws in the league. Now, a goal either way, and that's you're skyrocketing up there. 60 odd points. It's so tight in these from second through to sixth. Sure, as we saw in the sort of pre-split games as well, There was stages where Cliftonville and Portadown were so close to being there as well. Um, but it's just getting that second place saves you so much hassle and so much jeopardy. I think they were knocked out of the Irish Cup early enough. I just feel that Coleraine really should have pressed on a bit. Certainly the second half, after January, everything seemed to sort of go a bit more swimmingly as such. But definitely been chances this year where they could what could have been for them.
The problem is being that some of those lows have just been very, very poor, but they have worked their way up, built them up to a very strong canter. And look, why else play at any other speed? But they will be going for it in every one of these games, because even snatching third would mean the race to Europe goes through the showgrounds of Coleraine, and that could be a real benefit. This is Coleraine who lost out last year in the final away from home to the Crews, so they'll want to be in a position where they have to lose on their patch. And we spoke there, Linfield have got this opportunity in Europe. What a way to ignite their summer plans and them going into next year for Coleraine, if they're one of the teams that can benefit from European money this term. I'm sure a lot of teams would prefer any other team but Coleraine to get it if they weren't to grab it. But Glens, I mean, we've talked about them already. They do good because they're able to beat Coleraine at home. They do okay against Linfield. Quite like that goal from Jenkins, but it's just been so topsy-turvy. You don't know what they're going to do. Perhaps the fact that they do have the ability to win or lose at the absolute, drop of a coin might help them, because 3 points are better than one across the board. And that's, if you're really looking at Larne, that's their current problem, is that they're just not getting across the line with anybody, and they're either not able to go up and finish off a team like Dungannon on Tuesday, or they just slip on a banana peel in the way they did against the Crews on Saturday.
It's just so many options, so much going on, like so much going on at both Larne and the Glens this season for different reasons. And I don't think you can actually argue that between the two of them, whoever finishes second has probably, right well deserved it. Neither team has been good enough to topple Linfield. The points don't lie on that front. A 25-point gap with an extra 3 games to play is absolutely atrocious for any team to sort of look up at. It's nearly like I think both teams knew fine rightly at a certain stage in the season that it was all over for them league wise, but there's been so many moments at the Glens this season where it's all gone wrong at the wrong times. Just as you said, like you look, they do that. I'm gonna cut across the Irish Cup here because it's such a good sort of measurement of it. You do the big job and beat Linfield 2-1 after extra time, and then you're set up with a tie against the championship team in the quarter final of the Irish Cup, and you go and blow it. It just seems to be the Glentoran way this year.
Who out of Larne or Glentoran, if one of them are to snatch second, who do you think would be better set up to win that gauntlet of a playoff?
I hate even trying to think about this, because you're looking at that with 3 games to go, it could be a totally different scenario. Larne are without a win in these first 2 games in the split. Fair enough, Glens a win and a loss, but you could be going into the split and the Glens have slipped away, down into fourth potentially. There's scenarios where Larne press on and the Glens slip away. There's also scenarios where Larne slip away. There's so many permutations about how this could actually go, but for me, I just think Larne have a terrible way of getting things done in really, really efficient style sometimes when they have to. Now, it hasn't worked all year this year, as we know. It's not been their most extraordinary season in the Irish League, but for me, Larne just seemed to have that edge on them. I think if I was either a Larne or Glentoran fan going into that playoff, I'd certainly be more confident as a Larne fan compared to being a Glentoran fan. I just think Larne would edge it slightly.
there is a real incentive to avoid sixth, of course, because a part of it would be that you're not going to be playing a home game against most of the teams in that race. But also, I mean, this Cliftonville side look better and look strong, and particularly if you're the Crews, do you really want? And you also have to play an extra game if things work out in a certain
Hmm.
way. Because yeah, wouldn't you? Because if the Swifts finish outside the top two and they were to win it, obviously Cliftonville win the Irish Cup, they're not in the split.
Hmm.
But I mean, I'll
There's
just leave the
so
math.
many. You just you know that.
I'll move on from that point and just say no one wants to play Cliftonville,
Yeah.
even if it's at home. But I mean, the Crews keep themselves in and about there. I can't. I mean, what's it? Glentoran with 57 with 3 games to go. I think mathematically, like that can happen just because everyone has to get points,
Hmm.
win or
Yeah.
lose or draw against each other. So I don't think that's possible, and I'm not going to do the maths there. But again, I think the fact that they're in there, they're still competitive, is such a huge positive for them, because they could have dropped off and lost that mentality, but to keep up that streak in the top six is a really strong baseline for the Crews. And let's give props to a dark horse, a player who I really, really, really like. Nippy on the ball, can cross, can attack defenders. Like I said last week, the Shirt King. Where have all the wingers gone? This boy's a winger, and what a goal he scored. Mr. Nixon, take a bow.
Yeah. Played a real strong game against Linfield at Windsor. Tuesday past there. I think he was in behind our defence much quicker than I expected. Real solid player. Um, that as you say, that sort of old school winger, who's just not particularly tall, extremely fast on the ball, that instant burst of speed, and he's gonna cause fullbacks and centre halves a lot of trouble. Wherever he goes, whether he's cutting onto the wing or even cutting inside. There's so many permutations where he ends up with a shot on goal and really proved himself at the weekend with another good goal.
Our fixtures this weekend are all Saturday at 3 o'clock. Feeling traditional. I look at this lineup and I say that there's not a huge amount on the line, but there's one absolute standout fixture, and that is Coleraine Larne. Are Larne able to shake off this malaise, this rustiness, this lack of bite and killer instinct against the imitators, the new boys in town, the team who have taken Mr. Ives, although he's injured at the minute, isn't he? Because that's why Jarvis had to jump in. But look, they're the pretenders. They're a team who could really stunt Larne's ascent towards second. I like Coleraine in this game, and I like them a lot.
Uh, it's tight though. It's not going to be. It's not going to be an easy game for them. I think the home advantage is where you're sort of leaning towards that will give them just that a bit of edge. I think there'll be a goal in it. Um, Especially after last week, Lawrence draw and Coleraine obviously getting that win against the Swifts might just propel them slightly more in favour. I just don't. It's so tight, so very tight. I think 2-1, 2-1 sound good.
I'm going to say 3-0 Coleraine.
Oh my goodness! Right, okay, right,
And Player of the Year nominee Matthew Shevin is going to score one of them via the penalty spots.
okay. You're very,
uh,
very sure about that. Okay, fair enough.
I've just decided I'm very, very sure. I don't know. I think Larne look slightly limp up top and don't have the fluidity or the confidence or the strategy to just break through teams. They just had to deal with wave of attack from Dungannon midweek, and I think that ultimately you have O'Connor, who I like. You've got O'Neill, who's a very, very solid striker in this division. McKenna can pop up, but no one has been able to unlock and partner up Andy Ryan quite like Lee Bonus did. And Ryan isn't cooking, Lauren ain't cooking, and they don't have that Miller to push through. They haven't had him all season to push through centrally, and it's been difficult. So maybe I'll look like a fool, but I just think Coleraine have the bit between their teeth, and another game for them at home. I think they'll exploit a Lawrence side who were very messy at the back on Saturday. Very, very messy. Crews Glentoran, it's a sea view. The question will be, will Glentoran break down the Crews? Probably. I'll say this is maybe a 2-1 Glentoran, which would pretty much seal things up for them almost.
Yeah, I've gone 1-0 Glens. Didn't actually perform ridiculously poorly at Windsor on Saturday. In a game where Linfield really, really wanted to win as opposed to had to win. The Blues sort of forced them into sort of this not being able to get out and play their real style of football. As it's probably said every week on the podcast as well, those CVs are difficult place to go. But I think the Glens just have that edge. Certainly the front runners for the Glens will definitely be better players than the Crews, and I just think the likes of Jenkins and Fisher running at Jimmy Gallagher, who has unfortunately lost the yard of pace he never had, from what I can see. Great player, but just seems to have lost a wee bit of it. I think the Glens will just edge it.
Crews, as much as they had that late fight back against Lauren, they're starting to look like they're running out of puff after a long enough season for them, and they'll give it a good go in this fight for Europe, but I just can't see them getting across the line with all these big games. Blues against Dungannon. Again, it's hard to really bet against Linfield because you keep thinking that they're going to be partying all week, but Dungannon never find it particularly easy up there at Windsor Park, so you just got to back the Blues when the Blues are playing at Windsor.
Yeah, always back the Blues. That's sort of life motto for us. Just talking about the whole partying all week. I saw on Kirk Miller's Instagram story he was only collecting his car this morning, so that sort of shows you how much partying's been done on the Blues side of Belfast. But yeah, Dungannon maybe just be up getting the feel of the pitch, which is rather dry for the old Irish Cup final. This will be Linfield's last home game of the season, so I would suspect Linfield will want to go out in style and give the Swifts a good 3-0 humping by the looks of it.
Ballymena against Carrick. This is just slightly finishing up fixtures here. It's hard to tell what will happen. I mean, Jim Irvin's Ballymena can still fight to try and get something in case there's a bit of a slip up, but it would take some big turnaround. I mean, they're 6 points off Cliftonville here, so are they? Sometimes games like this are barnstorming, crazy goal fests. You've seen Ballymena score 5 and then concede 5. I would not count this fixture as one of those that has this potential.
No, I think Carrick are sort of wise to it, and wise to the fact that all they need to do is get themselves over the line in this one, and it'll not be sort of this whole, 4-3, 5-4 sort of scenario that we see sometimes at the end of the split. Carrick get that point, and it's all all lovely and sorted, and everything's good. That they're in the playoff, and that's basically where they need to be. But it's going to be a tight one. Ballymena have definitely been, far superior to Carrick season-wise this year. But I have just this sneaky suspicion that Carrick are going to win 2-1. I don't know why. But Carrick 2-1 seems sort of... I just have this fantasy in my head of Carrick scoring this late goal and sealing the whole sort of 11th place and making it all sort of fine and dandy for 2 weeks. They get a wee holiday and then get the big game against whoever finishes second in the championship.
Fair, yeah, I think that's... Yeah, I probably agree with you. I'm going to say 2-1, but I'm going to go Ballymena. It's a success Edagun against Danny Gibson, who will outscore the other, or probably 0-0. This is a funny one. Glenavon go to Solitude against Cliftonville. Cliftonville just want to keep on winning. Glenavon played a wreck of kids on Saturday, many of them from the bench. Like, McLaughlin did a quadruple substitution at halftime and threw on a bunch of teenagers where you're like, are these the next stars or ones we'll never hear of again? All look sturdy, all look like they've got great builds. So that Glenavon talent factory continues on. This could be a bonkers 4-3, couldn't it?
Totally disagree. It could.
It is. No, it is 4-3 Cliftonville.
4-0 Cliftonville.
Rub it up, you.
Glenavon won't get a sniff. I don't think. I think that Cliftonville are going to go on this sort of barnstorm. They want to. They just want to put this season in the league behind them and just say, hold on, we're way better than this bottom six and beat them, everybody convincingly. I'm going to go 4-0. Glenavon season has been over for about 2 months. So Paddy McLaughlin is going to have to go and try and, field these youngsters again, I would say, save a few for next season.
Something miraculous would have to happen to not have Portadown Loughgall be the final game I talk about next week.
Yeah, I don't see anything coming of this apart from
No.
the final. No, 3-1 Portadown.
3-1 Portadown.
Yeah, I am going to put it to you that Loughgall will go 2-0 down. They will then pull a goal back, and then they will be, all guns blazing, trying to get an equaliser and keep on pressing. And Portadown are going to run up the other end and score very late on, to put that final nail in a Loughgall shaped coffin, which has been brewing for a very long time, unfortunately for them. Yeah, I've gone 3-1 Porch.
No, I'm just gonna go 0-0 there. Teams who will struggle to score against each other. And look, for example, right, if Portadown win that and Cliftonville slip up in the 7-goal thriller against Glenavon, like, it's then down to 2 points with 2 games to go, and Cliftonville and Portadown, are they against each other the week after next? They are. So, I mean, you never know. They've still got to keep fighting. But I don't know. I think perhaps if that performance on Saturday doesn't suggest that, particularly Portadown, I've said, yep, that's us. Thank you very much. All's good. I don't know what will. Albeit Portadown have like 0 centre backs currently healthy. So, things happen. But that's us. That is us, Mr. McGuiggan. A season of dreams for you and all your Linfield faithful. You'll be hoping you'll be right on this podcast at exactly the same time next season.
Yeah, preferably even sooner. We want to win it 10 games to go next year. Make it even more fun. No, honestly, dream season compared to where I was sort of sitting at the start of the year, worrying about what was going to happen. Really happy with how it's gone.
Well, Mark, until next time, I'll let you go help find Kirk Miller find his car. And I will chat to you very, very soon.
Thank you very much, sir. All the best.
Comes to the point where I think I should be like singing songs and doing rhymes, but the only thing I need to tell you or suggest or ask you to do is, I think, go on to the Kicking Match page on whatever your podcast player might be. You'll find a wheel or a couple of dots or something like that, and you can hit follow or subscribe, hit a bell. When you do that, you get a little notification next time you jump on. Whenever I upload things, it means you don't need to check back wondering, is my player connected to the internet? Why hasn't it uploaded yet? Where is it? It means you get a notification. So you can just be having a good time, walking about, having a nice day, and like, wow, Kicking Match is up, ready to rock and roll. And you never know, beyond this season ending, it could be a chance, just in case, you never know, we surprise pod here or there. No promises. Good way to go, so keep in touch with all that is at Kicking Match on Instagram, Facebook, and or Twitter. The sun is very fun. Go enjoy it. Till next time, goodbye.